Thank you so much for tuning in today's video. This is part of a series exploring the relationship between the government, our diets, and the world around us. This completes a segment on meat and environmentalism, discussing how the government has suppressed and silenced anti-cattle environmentalist advocates. Now, when I first started looking into this, I swore it was some sort of wild conspiracy theory. It isn't. Our government and meat industries have significant control over independent environmentalist organizations. So let's start with these organization websites. Kip Anderson, producer of Cowspiracy, met with organizations like Greenpeace and Sierra Club to discuss cattle and climate change. At this point, we know that cattle is the primary cause of climate change, so naturally, their websites would have plenty of information. There was nothing. No mention of cattle. So I decided to check for myself. Sierra Club mentioned absolutely nothing about cattle, and Greenpeace only mentions cattle briefly when discussing the Amazon, but doesn't go into any detail. This was the case for most organizations I ended up looking at. Luckily, there are a few people who worked for these organizations and came forward. Will Anderson is one of them. Formerly on the board of directors, he quit precisely because the organization was ignoring cattle as the leading cause of climate change. Leila Salazar Lopez, program director of Amazon Watch, originally refused to address cattle, but quickly switched over and admitted the role of agribusiness in the destruction of the Amazon. Kip Anderson wanted to know why such silence was so prevalent among leaders of environmental protection. There are three main reasons. The first is funding. These organizations have accepted major payments from meat and dairy organizations, and since they're nonprofit organizations, they depend on these payments. The second is public opinion. People don't like being told that their way of life is wrong, and they would turn away from these organizations that told them to change. If you notice, the advice that we are given to change our climate is small. Try to recycle, turn off your lights when you're not in a room. Simple, everyday tasks that don't really hinder our normal way of life. Telling people to cut out meat, in other words, would be bad for business. Again, as nonprofits, they depend on other people's funding to continue their work. The final reason is actually really terrifying and the main point of this video. Those who have spoken out against the cattle industry and made an impact have either been killed or more often put under surveillance. One example of many is Dorothy Stage, a nun and an advocate for the Amazon. She criticized and called out the government and big agribusiness and was killed at point blank in 2005. Her murder was paid for by the cattle industry. She is just one of over 1,000 activists in Brazil who were killed for the same reason. Then there's Howard Lyman, a former rancher who worked to expose the meat industry for ill treatment of food and for environmental destruction. He was sued by the incredibly powerful meat industry under the food disparagement law in an effort to discredit his work. They succeeded. So then there's Will Porter, author and reporter of Green is the New Red, which explored the danger that environmental activists face from the government and major corporations. His papers and lectures are now constantly monitored because his work directly threatened profits within the meat industry. If you still aren't convinced, organizations like Greenpeace are considered eco-terrorists by the FBI. They target both the radicalized offshoots and the government organizations themselves, and this can be found on the FBI website. I have provided the link below. Civilians and organizations are being threatened if they choose to speak out against a practice that is quickly killing our planet. As far as I'm concerned, this is a direct threat against freedom of speech, but that's my opinion. This all suggests a few things. One is that the cattle industry is so massive and so wealthy that they can really get away with almost anything. The FBI element, however, suggests that the cattle industry practically owns at least a small part of the government. This is further backed by the industry's role in the USDA, which is designed to protect farmers and big agribusiness, as explained in one of my earlier videos. This terrifies me. It terrifies me that our diets, what we consider healthy, is decided by organizations that are willing to kill to preserve the status quo. It calls into question the efficacy and true consequences of consuming meat. It leads to the question, what will it truly take to change the way we eat? This video is the last one, exploring the role between government and our diet and the effects of cattle on our health and environment. This video series is a general exploration of my own research, and I encourage you to look into some of the issues on your own time, and you'll find some things that really surprise you. Below, I have links or references to the sources that I used and to ones that you can use as well. The next video segment will be exploring options for altering our diets and the best ways to do so. See you over there.